Hey guys, Jimmy at Lure Build. I had to restart this video multiple times. That's how difficult these lures are. These Madotachi Hanitas. The spring install is where you're going to run into problems. The very first thing you got to do. So, there's the spring. We've got to get that wedged pretty much horizontally in there till it pops into place. And then it will leave us a little bit of a gap to put one of these camber bars in. So you got to pinch the spring, and then once that's flat and pinched, you kind of got to press it in like a bearing would be. So as you can see, that's just the beginning. We've got to feed that. Well, I didn't even really do anything, and it moved, and it popped out. Try that again. You can't work it from the left or the right. You got to kind of do both to get it evenly in there. I'm going to put a bar behind it to try to help keep it from popping through. And we got to kind of work the front half, back half until it's in place where it needs to be. It will pop in place on its own. Kind of just heard something. Sounds like it popped into the socket. Yes, it's popped into the socket. So now you can probably kind of see that screw is in the middle. It's in the very middle of this bait. It's not necessarily leaning to the left or the right, but there is a slot in there for this. And we got to push a bar behind it, one of these bars that have threads. And for this one, it's a little tougher because the spring, although it's where it needs to be, it's not decompressing all the way. I just was able to push it a little bit with this tack, which is one of your the tack is for the tails. Let's see if we can push this bar through now. We got a little bit of a gap that we didn't have before. Nope. So we're going to try to decompress that spring again. We're getting it into the slot though, deeper, which is what we need. Okay. It's got a little bit of a gap, but just not quite enough. So what I'm going to do, take this tack, if I can. I'm going to try to decompress that nail, or I'm sorry, that spring a little bit. Try to get that camber through. It's bending the spring. I don't want to bend the spring, so that won't work. I gotta press this spring in. It's starting to work down. The slot has a little bit of a dip in it, which is what I think I got it. There's a bigger gap now behind the spring. That's where this bar is going to go. I just want people to know what you're getting into when you buy these and you got to put one together, or if you're buying the lure and you got to replace the components inside. Okay, if you can see there, that spring, we're right behind the spring. We got that bar. Now we got a spring action there. So that is the most difficult thing about these lures. Rest of this is fairly self-explanatory. Now, the next thing that you've got to do, you've got another bar. But before we install that, let's go ahead. Your fins will have little arrows marking towards the front. There's a little arrow design, and that will help you recognize the front. You should have a lip to lift. We're going to grab one of our little tiny screws. That's why I said a magnetic, on other videos, a magnetic screwdriver would be ideal. I don't have a jeweler's magnetic. Wish I did. Probably going to get one. But make that easier. Put that screw. Go ahead, put that screw in that fin. Let's go ahead and tighten up the front. Little tiny screws. Real tiny screws. I'm not going to tighten it all the way. I just don't want it to fall off. We're going to go ahead and put a screw on the other side, the other fin. They are opposite fins. It's not one size fits all. So you have a left and a right. It should protrude pointing back, but those arrows tell you where the front is. If you're up for a challenge, grab a couple of these. You should get good money for these baits. Retail, they're $86. You throw a custom paint job on there, sky's the limit. Ask what you want. On that side, I didn't tighten enough. Thought I did. Like I said, I was leaving it a little loose, but apparently I didn't even put the screw in the threads. So, looking at this again. I'm rating the threads. It's screwing in place. So, all right. So these fins are free flowing right now. Now we got to get our second camber in, and that's just going to go in this back slot at the bottom. I found it's easiest to do at the bottom. We're going to have to line this up with at least one side for now. Get one of our little screws. See, I lost that camber bar, and that's okay. So I got to line it up with the screw hole. I'm not going to tighten it all the way yet. I need to have some play in this to get everything to line up okay. One more screw. Like I said, if you had a magnetic screwdriver, you'd be ahead of me right now. Because I just keep dropping these little things. And I can barely even pick them up. Let's line this up. It's close. It's not quite lined up, but I might be able to. Nope. There we go. Maybe we get a lot of. You have to kind of, that spring is already activated, so I kind of had to push that fin a little bit forward to get it where I need it to be. Okay. Everything's working. We can go ahead and tighten up our baby screws. What's nice about this is once you get the spring in, you could paint the whole thing. You could paint the fins separate. And then you can put your screws in after it's all epoxied and done. But putting that spring in before you even paint it is going to be critical, because you could end up scratching up your paint job otherwise. Tighten these ones up. That's a tight spring. You got one click, so you got one action, two action, three action, and it's going to affect depth as well. It's going to be your deepest depth. Somebody earlier said kind of like the fins on a submarine. Yeah, very similar. So your most difficult parts are put together. You got a tail. I just kind of line up the tail, take the back, the non-sharp side of an X-Acto knife. Get it wedged into place. It's a fairly snug tail. I've dealt with much worse. It has some nice action that it'll have to it. There's a tack if you choose to use it or not, but it's meant to hold the tail in place. So what I would do is probably put just a little glue on this. You might even put a little glue on the tail before you insert it. But these tails are replaceable. But I'd probably put a little glue on this nail, this tack, press it up through, and you might even want to, tap it in a little bit because it sticks out a little bit, but you could tap that in. I would test fit that before you paint it. But that does hold that tail pretty well. They do sell replacement tails. I may have some other color tails. These are like a pearl white. You could technically dye those. But that is a Madotachi Hanitas. Madotachi Hanitas. Probably one of the most versatile baits you'll ever see. If you're looking at something like a K9, like a DRT, K9, a Tiny Clash, you're familiar with those, that they have a whale tail and a fork tail, and to change the action, you need to move the tail, you need to replace the tail, or take the bill out. And those bills can be easily lost, and those tails can be easily lost on the DRTs. Nice baits, high dollar bait, good money for those, selling those custom painted. These are even more versatile. If I was fishing and I don't know exactly what depth I want, I'm going to make a cast. I'm going to take a cast and notch 1. If I didn't get any strikes, maybe 2 or 3 casts at that, I'm going to go to notch 2. Try that a couple times, go to notch 3. I'm not tying anything on. I'm not removing anything. This should be a fisherman's dream. This should be a tournament guy's dream, a lure like this. As you can see, 1, 2, 3. 3 different types of action that moves. You can push the spring forward to make it easier. I just like it clicking in place. It's in the next notch. There they are, guys. They come individually packaged with the parts, but you will have to do the assembly. Maybe down the road we'll get them with springs installed, but that's how they come. If you buy one retail and you got to replace the guts, that's exactly what you got to do. But thanks for watching. Check us out at lurebuild.com. Helps you guys out. There's a sticker. It's one of our stickers. lurebuild.com. We're the only ones who have this bait. It's definitely not for a beginner. Definitely not a beginner bait. This is going to be considered advanced. About as far advanced as I've seen for a lure. But you know what? People kind of get what they pay for. Fishermen are going to come back to you if they're winning tournaments with your baits. This is going to be very unique. And it's kind of just the right size. It's coming in. Let's see, guys. I got one of these fabric tape measures, which makes it kind of easy. So you're coming in rated about 5 inches. Rated a 5-inch bait. It's got a slim profile. It's got a soft tail. Pretty much everything you want in a lipless. Say lipless starts winning tournaments, which I'm sure they have. This would be the one I would want for big bass. But thanks for watching, guys. Check us out at lurebuild.com.